Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name's Sean and I'm so glad you're here as always. Thank you for joining me. Today we're taking a look at another knife from Steel Will. I have reviewed several products from Steel Will, most of which I own. The Cutjack, the Intrigue, and the Modus. Today we're looking at the Lanner, and this came to me via the Valtac Pass-Around group by Valtac Tactical Gear. So thank you to them for providing it. Links below to where you can buy one of these guys. So I'll start by saying this. Here's the box. There's the model number. There are a couple other variants of this that are larger, that have like a 3.75 inch blade. This is technically the mini, so that's your model number, F35M Lanner. I'll start by saying this. It is my least favorite Steel Will. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It would be like saying this is my least favorite cupcake or my least favorite child. Like, I love them all, and I do enjoy this a lot. It just happens to be on the bottom of my personal list of the Steel Will knives that I've handled up to this point. So let's get the short version out of the way. We've got G10 handles and D2 steel. It is a flipper with a 7.5 inch overall length, a weight of 3.2 ounces. It's going to be a tip-up carry for right or left-handed users. A price tag of about $59.99, $60 pretty much anywhere you look, and that's it. Yeah, it's the Steel Will Lanner. So let's do a couple size comparisons. Let's do the mini griptilian as we typically do, and you'll see the Lanner is a bit larger. We'll bring the paramilitary 2 in up top to see that. So it's a medium-sized knife, I would say. And then we'll bring in our Ontarios, as we typically do, the Rat Model 1 and the Rat Model 2. And it should land kind of right between these two knives. So again, a nice medium-sized kind of EDC folder. So that is some size comparisons for you. Let's talk about the blade. The blade is 3.25 inches in length. Your actual cutting edge is 1, 2, just a hair under 3 inches. Your additional kind of blade length that we're referring to is that finger choil there. So it's got a satin finish on a drop point. It's almost harpoon-like in the blade shape, in that you've got kind of this upsweep here. That it's a very gentle kind of sweep that comes up. If it came up like another couple millimeters and then dropped, I would totally call it a harpoon, and it looks freaking awesome if you ask me. I love the blade shape on this thing, and again, I think I did mention it is a satin finish. So that's what we're looking at as far as the blade, and as I mentioned earlier, the steel on that is going to be D2, and we'll see that right here. F35M is the model number, D2, and the model is the Lanner. There's your designer. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. One thing I will say about Steel Will is they are now putting this billboarding in a smaller font. So it's not quite as, it doesn't scream at you quite as much as it used to. I still don't like it personally, but they're trying, I guess. So that's what we're looking at as far as the blade is concerned. And the grind on that, if you're wondering, is a flat grind. And then you'll see a little thumb ramp there as well. The handle on this guy is 4.25 inches in length, of near perfectly textured G10 in my opinion. I really like the texture on this. It's plenty grippy. It's not overly aggressive. It's kind of right where it should be, according to me. The hardware is going to be stainless steel. You're going to have stainless steel liners, and those are going to be nested. So we'll take a look at the liners here. If we can get an angle where you can see them. You're not going to notice one at all on the show side, because there is none. You only have a steel liner on the liner lock side. And that's it. So they definitely, on a knife of this size, I think the G10 scale itself is plenty solid, right? You don't necessarily need a steel liner on that side, so that's what we're looking at as far as liners are concerned. You've got this red aluminum back spacer that's got some texture to it. You've got a lanyard hole that goes through that back spacer, so you can accommodate a decent sized lanyard, and then as you'll notice, you can swap your pocket clip for left-handed carry if you so choose. And the clip itself is a matte finish, which I actually like. It's something that jumped out at me about this knife is that all of the hardware, the pivot, the body screws, the pocket clip, it's all a matte finish, which looks awesome. You see so much like kind of high polished hardware. I think that was an excellent choice to do a matte finish on the hardware and the pocket clip. So really cool. I dig that a lot. I wish I could see more of that. The clip carries well. You'll have about a 1/2 inch protruding, something like that. Not too bad. They carry okay. It's not my favorite design in the world, but it serves its purpose. It's got good retention. So functionally speaking, the pocket clip is just fine. The action on this guy is a flipper. It runs on bronze washers. It flips fast and kind of if you kind of put some intention behind it. It's not the smoothest flipping of all steel wheels or of all flippers if you just use the flipper tab. But if you throw a little wrist into it, it opens quite fast. So, you know, no major complaints. I think it could be a little smoother. And if I added a couple drops of lube, I think it would smooth up a little bit. But as far as action is concerned, it's not the smoothest steel wheel that I've handled. But again, for EDC, is it really going to make a difference? Not necessarily. Maybe, you know, you won't want to fidget with it as much, but I fidgeted with this thing a lot. So that's the action we're talking about. The lockup is going to be a liner lock. It's a pretty thin, piece of steel there for the liner, but it locks up pretty early, probably 25%, and it is surprisingly strong. Up and down, there's nothing side to side. A tiny, tiny bit, I can kind of hear it rocking, but not enough to cause any concern. So I'm very comfortable with the lockup. And if we look at the centering, we will notice that it is perfectly centered right down the middle. So there's that. The texture, I mentioned the G10 for me is kind of perfect, and I love Steel Will's jimping. I think they do a really excellent job on their jimping in general, in that, as I sound like a broken record probably, but I can ignore it and slide past it. If I push my thumb into it, it becomes very purposeful. My thumb goes nowhere. So I do like Steel Will's jimping quite a lot. I think they do an excellent job. So I think the liner lock jimping is very much necessary, and I'm very glad that they put it on there. There's a little bit of a cutout to get your thumb in there, but if that was not textured in some way, I think it would be maybe a little too difficult to disengage. So I'm glad that they did that as far as texturing is concerned, because it makes disengaging this thing pretty simple. So overall texture is good. Ergonomically, it is very comfortable. The flipper tab itself is smooth. And the one complaint I have on this flipper tab is that it's very, it's got 90-degree angles, right? So it's not chamfered at all. And so those 90-degree angles are pretty sharp, actually. So not too stoked on the flipper tab. Functionally, it's fine. It flips fine, and it's rounded, in this profile. But in this profile, those edges are quite sharp. So I think they could have done a better job on the flipper tab itself. But, it's not going to be something that I think is going to cause any major issues for you, except maybe in one case, and I'll get to that in a second. So the grip is comfy, even for extra large hands like I have. Feels pretty comfortable. Little mild hot spot in a hammer grip, but not much to speak of. Every other grip is perfectly comfortable and usable, and it functions quite nicely. The one complaint, or I should say another kind of complaint I have on this knife, and I mentioned this on another steel wheel, is I don't love the textured aluminum backspacer, just because when it rides in the pocket for a right-handed person, when I reach in my pocket for other items, the side of my hand rubs against that. It's not anything to write home about. It's not going to cut you open. It just doesn't feel phenomenal. And so I would prefer to not have that texturing there. I think the G10 has enough texture to go along with that jimping, that in hand, I don't think I'm getting much from that backspacer texturing. So I could go without it personally, but that's just me. Overall, it performed really well. Sorry about the camera bump. I think I've got a piece of paper here. This is D2 steel, and this is the scientific test on how good the D2 is. It slices very, very well, and this is after visiting a number of people before me and I did some pretty extensive testing with this myself. I think Steel Will, in my experience, having owned or currently owning several Steel Will knives, I think they may be doing their D2 about as well as anybody in terms of their heat treatment. I've just personally seen really good edge retention and performance from the D2 on Steel Will. It's a steel we come to expect on budget knives, but I think Steel Will does it quite nicely. So I do like this knife. I will probably buy one at some point. I'll probably round over the flipper tab to make that a little more comfy. Maybe even take some 1000 grit sandpaper to the back spacer there. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not my favorite Steel Will. It's actually my least favorite that I've handled thus far, but that does not mean I don't like it, because I do like it. That blade shape to me is just so killer. I freaking love that blade shape. So a good design, I think. So yeah, there's a Steel Will Lanner. Thanks again to Valtac for providing it for review. I did enjoy having it. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch the video. It does mean a lot to me, and I will talk to you soon.